Okay, so with Hashem's help, we're jumping back into Yichud HaHisbodedus. Last week, if you remember, we didn't actually, we learned a little bit of the actual Sefer on page Yotes. I think we did up to Os Aleph. And we took a look at a very foundational paragraph from Rav Yosef Alba, the Sefer Ikrim, which spoke, if you remember, about the concept of cheshek. We spoke about the concept of cheshek and about how cheshek as the foundation for the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu really means that it's, at its core, it's beyond reason. It's beyond deserving. It's beyond explanation. It just is. It just is. It's a concept like, I think we mentioned also the word chen, where we find chen in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, much like Esther found chen in the eyes of Hamelech Achashverosh, where even though Shaloi Kedas, like we said, she wasn't deserving, she hadn't been called, she found chen. And Vayoshet La Hamelech Hashar Bet Hazav, and she was invited in. So that, as we're going to see today a little bit more, is the foundation for the dynamic of Hisbodedus, which we mentioned, I think, in the few paragraphs before Ois Aleph. We spoke about how the whole concept of Hisbodedus is going to need to be shlav achar shlav, right? Stage after stage, just like in relationships. Have to build it level after level, particularly with regard to shidduchim, dating, right? It's you don't jump in right away. It's sort of slowly getting to know one another, and then slowly but surely building the relationship. Okay, so let's begin. I guess this is the official beginning of the Sefer. If you can take a look at, again, page Yotes, where you see the little letter Aleph, and here we begin with the words Reishis Hadavar. Okay. Says the Heiliger of Kluger as follows. Shlita, what a privilege to be learning his words together. Reishis Hadavar, the very first thing, Sha'amashpia koines alav es hamekabel, is that the mashpia, the giver, which in this context of the relationship is Klal Yisrael as the kala, as the one that's being impacted, influenced by the source, so to speak, vis-a-vis the master of heaven and earth, the creator, who is like the chassan. So the first step in terms of building this relationship of Hisbodedus, which as we mentioned in previous years, is that like at the Ne'ilah of history, is the most intense kind of bond that we could build. It's the thing itself, like we mentioned in previous years. So the first step is that the mashpia needs to make space. Koines elavas hamekabel, brings the mekabel, meaning brings the individual Jew into his space, kiviyachol, like a kenes, a knisa, right? It's the same words, but like a knesset rather, is a gathering together. Kones, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings us in, but oifen in such a way shemegadel koimasai. This is crucially important. That's why he begins with the word Reishis, because it's literally without this you can't budge with regard to Hisbodedus, and very much it's a hemshich, it's a continuation of what we mentioned last week. It's the same idea. What do these words mean? Shemegadel koimasai. What does the word shemegadel mean? What's the shurish of the word? Great, right? Gadol, it's great. So shemegadel is that a Kodesh Baruch Hu expands or makes great koimasai. It's a koma shlema. Yichra kol koima l'chalavad tishtachave. Every structure, every form. So megadel koimasai means HaKadosh Baruch Hu increases our identity, our, let's use this terminology, our sense of self. Shemegadel koimasai. Hi, thanks for coming. Happy you got in this week.
Yeah,
Baruch Hashem. So if you take two sheets, I think one of them should have two sides and the other one just one side, and that'll be. No, so I think it's the other one. All right, you'll figure it out. It's okay. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu welcomes us in such a way that He gives us confidence. Shemegadel koimasai. Hainu. In other words, Sha'amekabel margish, gesundheit, that the mekabel feels be'erkai, that we matter, that we have value. V'sameach, and therefore we rejoice b'hiyos mekabel. We rejoice about this, that we are in this position that we're in. This is the first thing that needs to take place in the relationship between The giver, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the receiver, each and every one of us that come into the relationship with Hashem. And here gives a mashal, he gives a parable, because it's difficult to explain without giving a practical example. So B'derech Mashal, he explains, Ka'ani amegi al beis hanosein. A pauper, a mashulach, somebody comes from Eretz Yisrael, somebody comes from a different place, collecting, he goes around from house to house. Ve'ein hanosein mistapik be'etzem anasina. And imagine if the giver wants to give in the most, exalted way, in the quintessential way to give. So it's not just enough that you reach into your pocket and you give something. Elomeir panav, his face breaks into a huge smile. Velibai, and he like illuminates toward the ani his face, reflecting what his heart is feeling. V'sameach likrasai, and he comes to the ani, and not just like sometimes it could be a bit of a tircha, especially if it's the middle of bedtime. Somebody knocks on the door. It's like you just want to get back to what you were doing, so you quickly throw him a couple of pounds and you get back. So, but this ani does the opposite. Me'ir panav, like we say, Yair Hashem panav ilecha v'yichuneka. Hashem should shine his face toward you. What does it mean? Hashem's face, it doesn't have a face, right? What does it mean for a person's face to shine towards someone else? Meaning to demonstrate the way in which the ashir, in this case, the wealthy person, or the balabayas, is genuinely happy that this person came to their house. Step number 1, open the door with a huge smile. And not only this, that the person gets the hargasha, that like, wow, this person's actually happy to see me, but he even expresses this with his words, ba'amira, and he says these 2 beautiful words, Tov Shebata. I'm so happy you came. I'm so happy you're here. In other words like this. So he hasn't given him anything yet. And certainly, hopefully he plans to actually give tzedakah, because this is not enough, so to speak. The person's going around not just to have people say nice things to him, he's trying to raise funds. But the dynamic is a completely different dynamic. When the busha of the fact that he has to schlep from place to place, and he knows that he's being a tircha. That's the worst part. It's not just enough that there's the shame, that he can't be at home with his family, so to speak, that he has to go around place to place because of whatever circumstances that life threw his way, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gifted to him, but that ultimately manifests as a struggle. But he knows that the whole thing is unpleasant, because he knows that it's not the most exciting thing for people to hear a knock at the door, and they think it's Amazon. That's even worse. And they think they're getting something today. Now every knock at the door is like, we're getting something. And they open the door, and lo and behold, it's somebody who needs you to give something to them, right? So imagine if the first thing we do is we tell the person, it takes a second, take a deep breath. You smile at the person, Tov Shebata, wow. I'm so thrilled that you chose to knock on my door. And you give the person confidence. When we do this, the person feels like a person. You give the person a sense of self, a sense of worth. And he starts to see himself as someone that matters. And then afterwards, if you choose to give that person tzedakah, mekabel ba'ofen acher legamri. All of a sudden, he's mekabel the tzedakah in a completely different way. It's a completely different dynamic now between the two, between the mashpia and the mekabel. Why is there a difference in terms of the dynamic? Because again, on the simplest level, a person comes and knocks on the door for tzedakah, person gives the tzedakah. It was very, very technical, right? This person needs something, the other person has something. There's a mitzvah in the Torah called tzedakah. There's no relationship. There's no yichud of any kind. It's just very, very simple. You could, if you, eventually a couple of years from now there'll be robots. You can send your robot to do it. Just drop a couple of pounds in his hand, and he can send the robot. There'll be robot mishulachim collecting money from robot balabatim, and that's it. It's very transactional. It's very, very technical. Extremely technical. And just as an aside, today it's like very, very, very much universally accepted for people to do charity campaigns, right? And in a certain way, it's great, because it's a big headache for organizations to do dinners, and that itself costed so much money. Not that charity campaigns are necessarily cheap, But the whole thing, it was just, and now like they sort of cut that whole thing out, and it's a much easier way, not only to accept money from the people that are coming, would have come to the dinner, but that all those people now can reach out to their networks and their family and friends. And on the one hand, it's a great thing. On the other hand, it's less personal. And there's something of value that gets lost when we sort of commercialize things, right? Especially this kind of thing, which like we're seeing could be so much more than just the reaching into a pocket and giving some coins. So the way that he expresses it in the next paragraph is Bekach nizgalta, in this moment is revealed haskama klalis lihiskashrus. There is a agreement, so to speak, a decision on the part of the mashpia that he wants more than just a moment at the door. That he's interested in a deeper connection, in a deeper relationship. We haven't gotten yet into specifics of why he's happy to see the ani, and there could be any number of reasons. Maybe he's so happy that now there's somebody to share a Dvar Torah with, and that they can talk and learning whatever it is that he was thinking about. Or like Chazal tell us, much more than the person gives the pauper, just the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the person an opportunity to give is a huge chesed already. So what a privilege that a person knocks on the door, gives us an opportunity to give tzedakah. These are different ways of thinking about how to express why it is that the person feels happy that someone knocked on his particular door. But we didn't get into any of this stuff yet. Before any of this expressing why it is that the person is excited that the ani chose to knock on his door, just immediately there's just the general sentiment that's expressed, whether in words or beyond words, just actually, just in terms of the body language and in terms of the smile and in terms of the way that the person opens the door, there's just a general expression, I see you as a person, essentially. Right? That there's more to this person than just, fits into that box in my mind that triggers a certain flow of actions, but that are impersonal. So now put it back into the context of Hisbodedus. When a Jew comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu again, like we are the ani knocking, ka'ani b'Pesach, it's part of the liturgy of Yom Neroim, ka'ani b'Pesach, and we're knocking on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's door alone, as a yachid. We're not talking about with a minyan, and it's not in shul. Person's walking on their own, and we're going to learn about the different places for Hisbodedus and the different times and the different aspects, but a person comes before Hashem, walks in the park. So the first thing that we need to hear, so to speak, it's interesting, he starts a whole seder of explaining how to do Hisbodedus, not with what we need to say first, but what our neshama needs to understand itself as hearing, even though we don't hear it through our ears. But the tzaddikim reveal to us what Hashem is all about and what Hashem is communicating to us, even though we don't hear it with our ears and we may not see it with our eyes, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't operate in that way. But Hashem speaks through the tzaddikim. And what the tzaddikim are telling us is that the Jew, first and foremost, even before opening our mouth to talk to Hashem about anything that we want to talk to Him about, we need to first hear something. What are we hearing? B'hiyos Yehudi Shomeya es hakaras erkai. We need, straight off the bat, to understand that in that moment that we walk into the spotlight, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is exactly what we do when we walk into Hisbodedus, the spotlight is on us. Mamash, we have Hashem's full attention. Rabbi Nachman teaches in Sichas Ran, based on a Rashi and Bamidbar, I believe it is, where Ki'ilu HaKadosh Baruch Hu has nothing else going on in His infinite considerations, as an infinite being, than that person at that time in that place. Mamash. The all of the infinite consciousness of Hashem is focused on that person in that moment in that particular place. And what is it that Hashem utters, kiviyachal? What do we hear echoing within our hearts and souls? Ki'ilu oimer lai Hashem yizbarach. It's as if Hashem, first and foremost, before anything else, is just looking at us and telling us, Tov Shebata. It's good that you came. thank you for coming to spend time with me. It's like the ani who comes before the balabayas, who be'etzem, what does he want? Yeah, he wants to raise funds. That's why he's going around knocking from house to house, because his wife, Nebuch, or somebody in the family has a medical issue and they have crazy debt because of all these different kinds of treatments, etc. Whatever it is that they're collecting for. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu recognizes that, each and every Jew has so many things that we need, and we come to davening with all the things that we're asking Hashem for. But Hashem understands, certainly better than we understand, that what underlies all of that, the real thing that we need, is we need to feel like we matter. We need to feel like we have value. Yeah.
But let's say hypothetically that people tell the Ani that, if he goes to this particular Baal Staka, he's going to really accept you, he's going to really want to give to you, it's a privilege for him. Then when he actually goes to the Baal Staka doesn't do anything, but just gives him the money, you don't feel it.
That's right, it's not enough. That's not enough. But it's different because the Balabas has a mouth and can speak to our ears. Hashem doesn't speak that way. How does Hashem communicate? Through the Torah, as interpreted through the tzaddikim. And so if Rav Kluger, based on Rabbi Nachman, was a person who was tapped into the highest levels of revelation, are channeling down to us what we ought to understand Hashem as saying, so then that's all we got. So we don't know anything else about Hashem other than what the tzaddikim teach us about the Torah, and that's all we know.
But it's not the same as a conversation.
It's not the same. It's not the same. First of all, as we're going to see later on, there are ways of hearing, so to speak, Hashem's responses echoing throughout our lives, and we're going to get into that sugya when we get to it. It's later on. But the more that we are conscious about the nekuda, that point of cheshek that we spoke about yesterday, again, which are psukim in the Torah, and it's of course not the same, but I would say it's even more than. It can be even more than, because the Torah, being the code and the blueprint for all that is real, so to speak, in our lives, has to be at least as real as the person standing next to us, as a person that's saying something to us. On the contrary, if a person says nice words to us, it still could be that there's some ulterior motive. Who knows if they actually mean it? But when the Torah tells us something about Hashem, and that's interpreted by the tzaddik and clarified in terms of how we ought to perceive the infinite being and his relationship with us, it's infinitely real. It's infinitely real. And the more that we learn teachings like this, the more we get the old version, so to speak, of God out of our minds, and the more we bring in Ani l'doidi v'doidi li, the Shir HaShirim aspect of the relational being that we've been speaking about from the beginning of the series, the more you hear it, and it becomes pashut, like it's clear. You don't need to force yourself to think in this way. It takes time. It takes time of learning these teachings. We have to unlearn a lot about Hashem, and we have to open our hearts and souls up to a whole new picture about what it is that Hashem wants from us, how He considers us, and teachings like this go a long way to fortifying that. So in a way, it's less real, but once we understand that Hashem isn't about to send me a text message or a WhatsApp, but Hashem speaks through the tzaddikim, and this is unequivocally what the tzaddikim since the time of the Baal Shem Tov are telling us. It's a new revelation, cheshek. It's all about relationship. It's all about Hashem's adoration for the essential spark of Jewishness that we have inside of our souls. And so how do you think that infinite being, filled with cheshek for each and every one of us, irrespective of how much we deserve it or not deserve it, feels when we come to the Hendon Park and we walk into that space to spend time with Him? So the first thing that we have to hear in our neshama, Hashem says, wow, Tov Shebata. It's so great that you came. That's what He's saying over here. Tov Shebata, the first thing is Hashem builds up our sense of confidence, and we have to feel that. We have to feel that it's no less real and no more real than any other experience. It's all about our perspective, yeah.
And also like your intuition is the sort of voice of Hashem in certain ways.
We're gonna get to that on the third page that I don't think you have. But anyway.
Yesterday with a wolf in the forest, and it was an amazing exercise. We had to find a tree and be blind.
With Rabbi Cowan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know all about it.
I had a feeling of where the tree was, and I found
Incredible.
it. And it was so powerful to delve into it and everything.
Yes.
So that was like a bit of experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to get to that. That's exactly right. Wow. So this is what we hear, Tov Shebata. And mitorer mikach, we are awakened by this. We're inspired to hear this, to really feel this way. And the only reason that we wouldn't be feeling this way is just all the baggage, all the layers that either religion or schools or institutions or our own negative self-talk or et cetera, has piled up on top of that essential nakuda that we know that we matter. Little children, before they get corrupted by the world, they don't have problems with confidence. Every little kid stands up on the table at the Sheva Brachos and, singing like it does. It's not a second thought. Little kids aren't self-conscious at all. Today, it either takes a lot of alcohol or some other kind of hopefully healthier tool to be able to get back to that place. But the essential self knows its value. And so it's only all the negative voices that we have to get out of the way. And to mamish just believe in this, to accept. You come before Hashem, He's looking upon us and saying, Tov Shebata. Godless koimasei be'einav. Our value is increased be'einav, in our eyes, b'shamai, when we hear Hashem Yisbarach chafetz bai, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu yearns for us, longs for us, v'roitza sheyav lefanav l'daber. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, again, let's go back to what we were saying before, Hashem knows that all of us have so much to ask for. Hashem knows that we're coming to tefillah because we're asking for parnas, and we're asking for health, and we're asking for shidduchim, and we're asking for peace, and we're asking for Mashiach, etc. But Hashem knows that underlying all of that, what we're really looking for, we're looking to matter. We're looking for companionship. We're looking for love. That's essentially what it is that the neshama needs to feel. We're looking, in the lashon of the Baal Shem Tov, we're looking for dveikus. We're looking for connection with the true reality. That's what we're looking for when we come before Hashem. And Hashem, knowing this, needs to let us know the first thing, because that's really what we came to Hisbodedus for. Beyond all the different things that we're asking, what we're really going to get out of it is the experience of reinforcing the certainty, again, that sits naturally at the core of the Jewish soul, of our infinite worth, as a part of this revelation, this nation, we call it a nation, this revelation within Olam Hazeh throughout history of a spiritual energy which Hashem is chashak ba, like we learned. That Hashem just has this crazy desire for, which is beyond any rational understanding. That's the first thing that we need to hear when we come before Hashem. These holy words, these good words, they come down from the infinite, and they come into our heart and into our soul, despite however little we feel like we deserve to now come before Hashem, that Hashem should focus on me, like I focus on Him, that all of a sudden now He should give me His undivided attention. Do I deserve it? I don't feel like I earned this privilege to come before Hashem, speak before Hashem. That's the wrong mentality. You're not coming before Hashem in this moment as you, because it's much deeper than that. Maybe to shul you come with as all the different layers, and this is like an institutional community thing, and so like you bring your this worldly identity. Hisbodedus is completely different, because Hisbodedus again is about the essence of the essence. That means that we're going to learn, maybe Hisbodedus is not even about asking for what we need. We're going to learn about all the different aspects of Hisbodedus. But maybe fundamentally, Hisbodedus is just about friendship, like we learned in our first two shiurim. So that means that Hisbodedus is to come into that space with the part of me that never needed to deserve this connection. It just is. It just is. So in a certain way, even beyond anything that we'll get from Hashem in terms of us davening for something and Hashem responding to our tefillahs, we already got something just by having the privilege of reconnecting to our essential selves in that moment. However, we need to be aware of the correct mentality which we're supposed to have when we walk into that space. And here Kluger is telling us what that is, again, based on what we learned last week from the Sefer Ikram of Cheshek. And that gives us a little bit of an understanding where, like, it doesn't matter whether I feel like I deserve it or not. Shed that. I mean, that part of ourself, you leave, on, using Hendon Park as the mashal, you leave it on Queens Road, or whichever way you're coming from, or Shire Hall Lane. That part, you leave by the fence. What you come in with your shining essence. You come in with the spark of Knesset Yisrael. That's what you're there for. You're not even there to speak about the mundane things. It's just that I cannot be alone in this world anymore. I need to be with the one that understands me the deepest in an infinite way. The one who sees me mamish beyond every other layer for what I am. B'shoirish. B'shoirish at the deepest root of my identity. And when that identity emerges, still carried by our legs, and still manifested in whatever words that we're going to say with our mouths, but when that identity is tapped into and comes to expression, all we hear echoing in our ears is Hashem telling us, like an excited child, kiviyachal, or a person that's been looking forward to, for date number 6, let's say, after 5 really solid dates, and they can't eat and they can't sleep, kiviyachal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu just says, first and foremost, like before anything else, Tov Shebata. I'm so happy you came to spend time with me. That's what Hashem is saying. V'yoredes ala mekabel. So these words, kiviyachal, are coming down from that place, and they sort of flow down to the mitboded, to the one that's doing Hisbodedus, ketal le'tchiyah. Like dew of life. Mamish, bring a person back to life. Let's turn over the page. So why is this important? Why is this the first step? So we already spoke about, in the context of what we learned last week about cheshek, right? That if right now we're coming as representatives, so to speak, or not representatives, the embodiment of that essential aspect called Knesset Yisrael that Hashem has cheshek for, so we have to shed the external identity and we have to walk into the spotlight with the light that we already have inside of us, right? And that's the friendship aspect. But over here he gives another explanation as to why this is going to be stage 1, step 1 of the process, the stages of Hisbodedus. And he says like this. In order to understand this in a deeper way, is she'ein Godless b'mekayim katnos. This is an incredibly crucial few words. I'm not quite sure who he's quoting this in the name of, but he says, she'ein, thank you so much, she'ein Godless b'mekayim katnos. There can be no Godless, expansivity, greatness, b'mekayim katnos, in a setting of smallness. In a place of katnos, there's no room for Godless to flourish. So how does that correlate with what we're speaking now? So he says, Imevakshim Yichud HaHisbodedus. A person comes into Hisbodedus. What are they trying to do? They are trying to connect to Hashem in a way, like we mentioned in previous contexts, in previous year, not like Hashem being our melech, not like Hashem being certainly like a slave driver, not even a god in the classical religious conception, not even our father, which is already good enough, but rather, what do we say? And what's the relationship aspect element of Hisbodedus? A friend, right? Our best friend in the world. That's Godless. That's the deepest, broadest understanding of what Hashem wants from us, why He created the world, how He sees us, how He looks upon us. So he says, if we come into Hisbodedus and we're mevakshim yichud begadlus, that's what we're trying to access. So he says, lo yitachin love elakach mitoich katnos. He says, thanks for coming. He says, you cannot come into that space when in your own mind you're in a place of katnos, you're in a place of smallness. It's going to be impossible to channel that light of Godless, that light of the way in which Hashem wants so much more from us simply than to do what He says we should do. Or that Hashem wants so much more than simply, to be our king and that we should be His servants. To be able to conceive of the way in which the whole reason that Hashem created the world is simply because He wants to build a relationship with us. We're never going to be able to tap into that mentality, all the while that we don't show up from a place of greatness, of Godless, of expansivity. Lo yitachin lava lekach mitar chatnus. If a person in their own mind is holding in a place of constriction, and they're holding in a place where they feel down on themselves, they don't feel worth it, they don't feel worthy, they don't feel like they have value, so Godless is not going to be achieved by a person who feels like a katan, because these two things don't go. Ein Godless b'makom katnas. So step number one is that within our own inner world, we have to access thoughts of Godless, perspectives that are expansive, meaning to be able to identify within ourselves our true essence. And then from that place, okay, that part of me is ready for the deepest relationship with Hashem, even though the external layers, we'll have to schlep them with us a little bit. But Hisbodedus is Godless personal prayer, this experience of one-on-one, a friendship with the divine, as it were. It's the most expansive relationship. It's the deepest spiritual connection. So to prepare for such a connection, you have to come into it with an expansive perspective on yourself. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Yehudi tzarech lehischaber lemetzius chavivusay eitzel koini yisbarach. The Jew needs to connect to the reality of the way in which he is beloved or she is beloved before Hashem. Umizeh, and from that place, laha'ir es mitzias hamatzav shu matzav bay. Then we can start talking about challenges. Then we can start talking about the way that life is so difficult. Then we can start talking about all the failures and the things we're struggling with, and so on and so forth. If we are to allow all of those aspects of life to be illuminated with Godless, right? Because what's going to happen, chas v'shalom, if a person walks into the context of personal prayer, but in their own consciousness, it's katnas, then they're going to start speaking about all the things that they're struggling with, and it's going to make them even more down on themselves. They're going to talk about their challenges, and they're going to say, oh Hashem, I know that you're punishing me, and I deserve it, and all this terrible thing. That's mamish not aligned with the truth. That aren't vessels for the light of the geulah that we mentioned about in the previous year, where we have to completely update our consciousness of what this thing God means, so that we can enliven ourselves, not chas v'shalom cause Judaism to become something that makes us even more stressed out, even more anxious, even more sad. On the contrary. But the prerequisite for speaking about difficulties, you walk in with Godless. That's step number one. It's like an aspect of the Pesach Seder. That's what the Svarim say. We begin with Kadesh. Kadesh, right away. Passover doesn't just mean that a Kadosh Baruch Hu jumped over the houses. Pasach al-Batei B'nai Yisrael. It's deeper. The Baal Tanya, the other tzaddikim, based on Arizal, explain that on Seder night, each one of us experience what's called dilug. Dilug means to jump, to skip. Midaleg al harim. It's described in Shir Hashirim that a Kodesh Baruch, that Mashiach rather, is coming midaleg, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu bringing the geulah, skipping along the mountains. Midaleg means to skip. Seder night, when Am Yisrael go from the Men Tesh Shari Tuma, from the 49 levels of impurity, enslaved under Paro, not just physically but spiritually. We couldn't daven the kasha, and we're dealing with such pain and trials and tribulations, difficulties. So in order to get free from that experience, what do we need? The greatest light of redemption. It's the sicker the patient, chas v'shalom, the bigger the specialist they need. Right? Commensurate with the darkness is the light that's necessary to be able to reach that place. Says the Ari HaKadosh, that's exactly what happened Seder night. Am Yisrael were in the throes of this spiritual darkness. Every single year, the same things happens, just like it did that first Seder night. There's a gilui, there's a revelation of the greatest light. The greatest revelation, when Hashem says, I'm not even using my malachim, I'm not using any of my spiritual messengers, ani v'loy malach, ani v'loy saraf, ani hu v'loy acher. Hashem himself, kiviyachol, comes down to that place and rescues his firstborn son, b'ni b'chayri Yisrael. Says the Arizal, we didn't have any vessels for that light on Seder night because we weren't deserving. So we didn't have the kalim. The light came down, but we have nowhere to put it Because essentially, as the Medrash tells us, the Malachim, the accusatory angels, came before Hashem, and he says, Halalu avdei avodah zara, v'halalu avdei avodah zara. They're the same. The Egyptians are idol worshippers. The Jewish nation were also on the level of idol worship. There's no difference between them. We were so lacking. So the Arizal says this incredible thing. Shavuos is called in the Torah. Who knows what Shavuos is called in the Torah? It's not called Shavuos, really. Atzeres. Right? Exactly. Shavuos is called Atzeres. Says the Ari this amazing thing. He says Pesach and Shavuos are not two separate chagim that just happen to be in proximity one with the other. He says in the deepest spiritual reality, Shavuos is the Shmini Atzeres, just like Sukkot has the first days, and then there's Chol Hamoed, and then there's Shmini Atzeres, right? It's like the final part of Sukkot. He says Shavuos is the Shmini Atzeres of Pesach, and the days of Sfira is a big Chol Hamoed. He says the whole entire day of Sfira is an extension of Pesach. Why do we need this time period? Says the Arizal, if the light came down originally on Seder night in such a way that we had no vessels for it, we couldn't keep it, it cannot stay. Says the Ari HaKadosh, the light comes down and then it immediately leaves. And so we on Seder night jump to the highest level. We begin right away with Kaddish. We're filled, saturated with an incredible spirit of Kedusha that ordinarily would take a very long time to work ourselves up to. Maybe Kaddish ordinarily would be the last of the 15 stages of the Seder, right? Not the first. So we jump to the top, and then the light is taken away. And then, during the weeks and the days of Sfira, we're slowly but surely building the vessels. So when that same light comes down again on Shavuos, Kabbalah HaTorah, we're able to take it home. We're able to bring it into our lives in a real way. Like that's the dynamic between Pesach and Shavuos and all the days and the weeks of Sfira, and the aspect of the Mishnah that tells us Derech Eretz Kadma LeTorah, that before a person has access to Torah, which is Shavuos, we have to build the vessels, we have to build the kelim. But also, what the Mishnah doesn't tell us is that before Derech Eretz is first Kaddish. Before working on ourselves, before having the healthy perspective necessary to feel that there's hope, that there's purpose in me even trying to piece back together all these shattered pieces of my human life, which is all these different weeks of chesed and gevura and tiferes, netzach hod, in all the different weeks with all the different midas that we're working on. The first thing is that I need to know how essentially valuable we already are. That's Seder night. Just right out of the gate. Kaddish. Dilug. We jump, we pass over, so to speak, all of the different madregas, and it's just this flash of Godless. It's called Godless in the Kabbalah Sfarim. A flash of expansivity, greatness. From that place, we can then engage with the reality that there's so much work to do, but we have the strength to do it. We know that it matters. That even though our efforts are always going to be stultified and stunted and crippled, but it's within the context of an infinitely valuable process. So going back inside, so he says, once a Jew walks into that space of Hisbodedus, and the first thing we hear is Hashem telling us, I'm so glad you came. It means so much to me. That's what we need to hear. It means so much to me that you came to spend time with me, says Hashem. And that's we could just breathe that in. And then our mind immediately starts to rush. Maybe Hashem is not saying that. Who says, right, there are other Mamar Chazal, and what about the Psukim in Yirmiyahu, and what, all these different things. That's what the mind does. And then we remember, because we're learning the depth of this, because you can't just teach this. We have to really, really sink our teeth into it. Mamash, we have to spend time with this. So then, we know enough to tell our mind, sure, I have things to work on, but that's not what I'm bringing into this space right now. That's not the part of me that's entering the space of Hisbodedus. Again, because what I want right now, I'm not coming to ask that Hashem should give me all the blessings in the world. Maybe I'm talking out roi. Maybe I'm really not fitting, and maybe I'm not deserving. But that's not what Hisbodedus is. Hisbodedus is not katnus. Hisbodedus is godless. So from that standpoint, I close away all of those voices and I open up that inner chamber of my heart, of my soul, where I'm ready to hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell me, you're okay as you are. Tov Shebata. That's what Hashem is telling us. Umizeh, and from that place, meaning, like we said, from the place of first night Seder, right? Meaning first night Pesach, from the place of Kaddish, from the place of essential holiness. That's why the whole entire Seder has to do with children. The whole things. The children are asking, and the Arba Banim, and we do strange things just so the children will ask, right? Because there's nothing more childlike than asking questions, right? Etc. We're trying to foster a spirit of childlike clarity into the essential worth of each and every soul, which children still feel. And then as we get a little bit older and we make the mistake of thinking that we were supposed to be angels, like we said already, if we teach our children that they have to be angels, when they're humans, they'll feel like they're demons, right? Because no one ever told us that, like, it's okay. Life is going to be a struggle and challenging, and that's perfection from the standpoint of the human, like I mentioned in a shir earlier today. That's what it means to be a perfect human, is to be imperfect, because that's what it means to be human. But we don't learn these lessons. And so we grow up and a little bit, step by step, that clarity gets chipped away. And eventually we just don't feel like we matter anymore. Because we project our sense of value onto the mitzius, the framework of Olam Hazeh. And whether that means in the broader Western sense, in the secular sense of like how much money does a person have, or what kind of job do they have, or in the frum sense, or chas v'shalom, a person should feel that the bar for success is let's say marriage or having children, and that a person is not a fully fledged human being. It's a crazy thing. It's a crazy mistake. Every single person has their own journey. Every single person has their own circumstance. Every single person is precisely where they're supposed to be at that given moment, because this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided for that person. But we sort of like, what's the word? We outsource our sense of value to the culture around us. Whether it's the general culture, whether it's the frum culture, whatever it is, but we forget along the way that none of that is where it's actually at. We don't value because of what we did, because of what we accomplished, because of what we have, because of how our lives look, because of etc., etc. We matter because we. Period. Because we matter, because we're here, because we're an neshama, and because we're a part of this glorious nation that, irrespective of what we manage to do or not do, Hashem has cheshek for us regardless. That's the nakuda. And that's what Seder night is all about. Kaddish. Childlike nature of just total clarity, where a kid doesn't need to do anything, and we love them, right? And they don't need to, and hopefully a parent shouldn't feel that I love my kid when my kid gives me nachas or something like that. That's a crazy thing. Lahapech, usually it works the opposite. The more we show our children how much nachas we have from them, essentially they're going to want to give us nachas. I mean, the relationship is healthy, it's built, it's strong, it's fortified. That's the foundation of it. But the love is unconditional. The love is so much deeper than surface level things. So memela umizeh, when we're plugged into this realization, so then laharis mitzias hamatzav shu matzui by, then I start to speak out all the different challenges that I'm going through in my life, but rooted in that place of fundamental worth, rooted in that place of Hashem's love. I know it sounds cliche because today everybody speaks about it, Hashem loves you, but it's a deep sugya to really get it. First of all, to really believe it and to understand it. It's a sugya. That's what we're learning now. It's a deep, deep thing. And it takes a long time to really understand the degree to which Hashem adores us. It takes a long time. So when a Yid then addresses all the different aspects of his or her life, rooted in that fundamental place, where they're able to see themselves for who they really are and the way in which Hashem sees that place, and specifically and maybe primarily relates to that point in the person, so everything changes. V'loy lasois es matzavig kimetzius yichida. And then we don't speak about our circumstances as isolated topics. This I'm going through, I'm going through this, and then maybe another day I'll come back and I'll speak about another part of my life, because all of a sudden my whole life with everything I'm going through is contextualized by the relationship. And so there's a context to it. And that context is founded on, again, these words, Tov Shebata. This, that Hashem is just happy to see me. This, that Hashem He cares about me. He's happy that I came to spend time with Him. So Memela, every single thing it's all bound together in terms of the relationship. There's a klal gadol amru, and this is what Chazal say. Shigadei latzeis mikatnos. It's really not Chazal, it's like the Baal Shem Tov, but it's also Chachamenu. That the Baal Shem Tov famously taught, Shigadei latzeis mikatnos, ein misaskim ima ata klal. That if you want to deal with lowliness and the small things that we feel are holding us back, constrictions in life, obstacles that we face, those aspects of katnas, so the Baal Shem Tov taught a new path. Ein misaskim ima ata klal. Don't deal with it. Don't focus on those things. So how do you deal with darkness? How does a person deal with mice that are scurrying around? The dark cellar. Says the Baal Shem Tov, light a match. Turn on a torch, flashlight. The way to battle darkness, not getting involved with the darkness, because a person that's wrestling with a person who's muddy is also going to get muddy. That this is not, it's not what we do. We root ourselves in Godless, in the greatness of who we essentially, fundamentally are beyond all of this. Ki'ilu shomea hayehudi baskol. It's as if the Jew is hearing in that moment, baskol pnimis milibai. It's like this heavenly voice echoing forth from our heart. HaKoireis, that's calling out ma'alasa shal neshmasai. Our inner greatness, how great the neshama is. We have no concept of what it is to be a soul, to be a member of Am Yisrael. V'ha'or hazeh, and this great light, doicha atas ha'choshech, that will push away all the darkness. And then eventually, as we're going to discuss later aspects of Hisbodedus, we're going to walk through the stages step by step. This is just the Pesach, this is just opening the door. Then will come a time to deal with the lowliness. That the main thing is to deal with it like along the way, but that's not our main focus. Cannot be our main focus, because it's inessential. It's not really who we are. So it's a thing that's happening in our lives, but it doesn't relate to the essence. And this, of course, is the ultimate strategy of the Satan, who maybe in his most overt form shows up as the snake, as the primordial Nachash in the Eitz Hadas Tov, or in Gan Eden. And when he comes to teach Chava and Adam, to suggest to them to eat from the tree, what happens after they eat from the tree? So Eitz Hadas Tov Ra means the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But the word das, in addition to meaning knowledge, can also mean connection. Vayeda Adam es Chava Ishtai speaks about the relationship that Chava had with his wife. So das can mean interchange, deep, intimate bond. Says the Nefesh HaChaim, when Adam and Chava ate from the tree, so what used to be two separate realms, the good on the one hand on its own, it was clear that it was pure good, and then also the realm of, so to speak, evil or concealment of Hashem, separateness as opposed to the realm of oneness, however you want to speak about that force, the external shell that used to be separate, Eitz Hadas Tovera. All of a sudden there was a obfuscation, there was a mixing in of the Ra into the Tov. And that's also what the Gemara says is crazy things, difficult to understand, that ban nachash al Chava v'hita bazuama. There was some kind of relationship, a physical intimacy that Chava had with the snake, and the snake inflicted within her terrible, terrible poison. That it took until Am Yisrael standing at our Sinai to get rid of this poison. That's what it means, that all of a sudden the snake used to be outside of us. It was absolutely clear to Adam and Chava that they were pure, that they were holy, and the Satan was on the outside. After Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, there's the mixing in of the Ra into the realm of the Tov, and that's a terrible, terrible mistake that we make, where we become identified with our actions, and in that sense, we think that there's just as much value speaking to Hashem in a lofty way about our good desire and our positive elements in our neshama as speaking about all the things that we struggle with. Says Rav Kluger and say all the tzaddikim no. Because in so doing, we're fortifying the very mistake that makes us act the way that we act when we forget who we actually are. Because then, we still show up as, okay, I have a little bit of this in me and a little bit of that in me, and it's like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing, where it's a black and white cookie. But both are part of the actual cookie, and that's not the case. That's a mistake. Fundamentally, essentially, we're Adam Le'elyon, we're Tzelem Elokim. That's what we are. Also, there's a little bit of a nachash inside, which is a completely foreign entity. It's nothing to do with us. Completely foreign. A foreign entity. It's not us. And this is hinted to in the Gemara that tells us in Kedushin Daf Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis. Tzoifa Rasha L'tzadik u'mevakesh lahamisai. The pasuk in Tehillim says the Rasha, Tzoifa Rasha L'tzadik, is always looking out for the righteous one of mevakesh lahamisai, trying to kill the person. And the Gemara very ominously says, Hu ha-Yetzahara, hu ha-Satan, hu ha-Malach hamaves. This is the same force. It's the Yetzahara, the evil inclination inside, that pushes us in ways that are away from Hashem, and away from emunah, and away from sensitivity, and away from expansive thinking and feeling. Hu ha-Satan is the Satan with all the implications of that, and Hu ha-Malach hamaves, and he's the one that ultimately comes to take a person's life at the end. It's all one character from beginning to end. Hatzileni miyad achi miyad Esav, like Yaakov Avinu said, save me from Esav, but save me from this that I think he's my brother. Save me that I shouldn't make the mistake of thinking we have some kind of relationship. I'm separate from him. But look at the pasuk that is used to serve as a source text for this. Tzoife Rasha L'tzadik u'mevakesh lahamisai. Now, who's the Rasha? So Chazal are saying the Rasha is the Satan, the Rasha is the Yetzahara, the Rasha is the Malach hamaves. Now let me ask you a question. If a person, mamish, has such a big Yetzahara, and a person is full all the time of the Yetzahara, he's battling and grappling with the Yetzahara, so I wouldn't necessarily refer to that person as a tzaddik per se. It's a Jew who's struggling. A person's filled with the Yetzahara. A tzaddik is a person who killed the Yetzahara, no? Like David HaMelech. So if you listen very carefully to what Chazal are saying, essentially what they're saying is, no. The Satan, Yetzahara, Malach hamaves, is the Rasha, meaning it's the aspect of Rishus inside of us that's completely separate, a foreign entity, the Nachash in the Garden of Eden that was outside of Adam, nothing to do with the person. And Sofa Rasha, that Rasha is looking out, L'tzadik, for the righteous, which is us, which is always us. And we become identified with our behavior. We become identified with our thoughts. We become identified with our lower selves, which Bechlal isn't ourself. Bechlal isn't ourself. And so we come into Hisbodedus, the way to first ground the dynamic is tapping into this place inside of us, which is that aspect of cheshek, that aspect of what I actually am, that aspect of what Hashem sees when He looks at me, that fundamental aspect. And then, kila'achar yad, it's almost as if like memela, on its own, naturally, the other things will fall away. The Kalash and Arizal, like the Arizal says, but Godless, when a person is living a life of Godless and they see things for what they really are, and they begin to identify as an elevated person, Memela naturally will overcome a lot of the small things. Not because we're busy looking out all the time. I got to make sure not to say that, and I got to make sure not to eat that, and I need to make sure not to hang around with these people. Meaning each thing is an isolated thing. No, says the Ari HaKadosh, you identify yourself as a Bas Melech. Identify yourself as a princess, and naturally you're not going to hang around, with those actions or whatever it is that we're working on. It happens naturally. So the first step, though, is Godless. And he quotes us a little story, an anecdote, last few minutes from Rabbi Nachman. Shepam achaz diber, that's one time a chassid came in Rabbeinu Zal before Rabbi Nachman, v'kaval afanim ha'oid, and he started to complain. Hashem. He's finding it so difficult to serve Hashem, and everything that he tries to do, he's failing, and he's falling into this Yetzer Hara and that thing. And Ana Rabbeinu Zal, so Rabbi Nachman announced. Ana Rabbeinu Zal, Rabbi Nachman announced, Va'amar, and he said, Ata asei tov. You just focus on doing good things. Ata asei tov va'asoik ba'avadasei be'emes, and serve Hashem the way that Hashem ought to be served. That's your thing. When you fill your time and you fill your efforts with positive things, with good things, Azai hatov yushar, so all that will be left is the tov, v'hara, and here's the key word, the evil, everything that isn't tov, mimela Hisbodedus. Mimela is one of those yeshivish terminologies that there's not a very good translation for in English. The best that I could come up with it naturally, like on its own, memela Hisbodedus. It'll go away by itself. So we don't need to focus on the bad midos per se. Work on the good midos. Fill your time with good things, good thoughts, machshavas tovos, helping other people, mitzvahs maisias, Hisbodedus, speaking to Hashem, thinking good things about yourself, thinking good things about other Jews. Good. This is what the Baal Shem Tov taught based on the pasuk of Tehillim, Sur Me'rava Asei Tov. So the way that it was understood before the Baal Shem Tov is Sur Me'ra first. You got to get rid of the evil, and then Asei Tov, and then then you can do good. And the Baal Shem Tov interpreted the pasuk exactly the opposite. He said, sur me ra. A person wants to stay away from doing ra. Very, very simple. Asei tov. Just do good things. And in doing good things and filling your time with holiness, filling your time with exalted ways of thinking and connecting to Hashem, naturally will overcome the small stuff. I don't have to focus on each and every detail. Let's just get into Eis Beis. Pesach HaHisbodedus hi hagdalas hakayma. So first and foremost, just straight, off the bat, the first thing is hagdalas hakayma, is to come in with a sense of self, a true sense of self, clarity. I am not the snake. I am not the lower voices. That's an extraneous force. That's the Rasha. That's Tzayfel. It's Tzaddik. That's not me. I come in as a spark of Knesset Yisrael. I come in as a beam of light that Hashem has cheshek for, irrespective of how much I think I'm living up to that or not. It's futile. It's irrelevant. It's moot. Hi agdalas hakayma. Kasher Yehudi is chadesh, when a Jew walks in with a sense of renewal. Lahakir b'chashivus lefnei Hashem, to be conscious of his chashivas, of how much Hashem needs us, so to speak, how much each and every one of us. I always say it isn't economically viable, so to speak, for Hashem to keep people alive, for no reason. Like it takes such enormous energy. We can't imagine what Hashem puts in Kiviyachon. Now he's the infinite one; he could do everything. But to keep a person alive, even the most dormant person, literally a person sitting and doing nothing, not thinking, not speaking, just surviving on the most basic level. All the scientists since the beginning of more advanced sciences, all together, if they would work together and put all their chachma together, they couldn't figure out how to produce enough chachma to be able to do that. Life is so precious. So it's not stam. Even a person who feels like chas v'shalom they have no value, that there's no such thing. So that's the first thing. To lahakir, to recognize chashivusay lefnei Hashem, how much Hashem values us. Mitoich emuna, out of this strong faith, which is all based on the Torah, which speaks to us about Hashem, which is interpreted and guided and reflected by the tzaddikim of every generation. Shakadosh Baruch Hu megader kaimasai. So of course, like we said, we don't hear Hashem saying these words to us, but our neshama does. And our heart does, in as much as our mind remembers this and convinces ourselves, kiviyachol, which we don't need to be convinced, because again, our neshama knows this fundamentally, but our mind is telling our heart, this is what's going on. This is how Hashem is present in this moment. He's looking at you with total adoration. So this will renew within our hearts our fundamental value and the esteem with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu considers us. Ka'amur, as said, and with this we'll finish, Terem ba'el tachlis hakesher, before we get to the essence of the bond, you haven't said a word yet. This is all like literally, you took one step into the field over there. We keep on, again, Hendon Park is the most local, natural space where a person, I think, would want to go and do Hisbodedus. Haven't said a word. Haven't thought about what you wanted to say, nothing. Just begin to walk through that field alone. You shut your phone, leave it at home. You're spending time with Hashem now. What's the first thing that we think? Is that we hear Hashem kiviyachol. Hashem doesn't have words. Hashem, you understand? We're overwhelmed with the sensation of worthiness, of value, of being seen with a capital S, right? Mamish, being seen. So terem bal tachlis hakesher, before we start to actually pursue the kesher, the bond, ki matzerak bedarga rishoina, like we're just in the beginning, and even this we're going to speak a whole lot about the dynamics specifically. Now we're just speaking in general terms, but we're going to get into the specific dynamics, the way that we should think about why it might be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu values us so much. But we're just getting into the beginning of it. But the first thing is, even before we start the Kabbalah Shvachav, to hear more specifically how Hashem praises us, why He would be praising us even when we sometimes don't feel like we deserve to be praised. Like we haven't yet entered into the pinnacle, the ultimate expression of the bond that we're after. But the first thing is, it makes no difference. Ma'amin, we believe, umakir, and we recognize the ta'am of ha'erka shel hadarga hanochachis, the importance of the first step, right? That we're the first rung on the ladder. Hamakdima v'harishona, right? That the premise, the initial interaction, the first date, so to speak. So the first thing we do is we allow ourselves to feel that, to really feel that. And the less that we naturally feel this way, chas v'shalom, that a person doesn't feel that they matter, and chas v'shalom, the more we need to understand that, first of all, on the contrary, those are the kinds of people that Hashem loves the most, and we can prove that from many Mamar Chazal, as Daka v'Shval Ruach. Hashem says, I dwell with the lowly in spirit. It's specifically those that don't feel like they have a full heart, that Hashem says, I'm there with you. Hashem feels so connected to those. Karav Hashem l'nishbar lev. Hashem is close to those who have a broken heart, maybe even more. But aside from that, the more it's so crucial for us to learn that the reason that we don't feel our own individual worth is because we've become completely confused as to where my value should come from. And again, we outsourced it into the hands of other people. And the truth is that we matter to Hashem. Like, what is this business thinking? Well, society and this, and maybe I don't have a place. Like, shtuyot. B'shvili nevra olam. If you were the only Jew in the world, it would still be worth keeping the whole world alive just for you. In your worst day, not in your best day, your worst day. Just because you are. That's Hisbodedus. What a dream. You just walk into the field and you feel that. Haven't said a word. You feel this. That's step number one. And that's the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of the appropriate dynamic, as it were, to understand what we're attempting to accomplish by encountering Hashem in this new way that Rabbi Nachman revealed, which is this brand new way for the very end of time, the Ne'ilah of history, as it were, which is Hisbodedus, which is the direct kesher of all ksharim, the bond beyond all other kinds of connection that we're privileged to learn about, and that we ought to practice and spread and share with our friends and family. Okay, so as Hashem, we're going to open for questions now. I know we're a bit over time, but yeah. Excellent question. Excellent question. So know something? That question must be in the atmosphere, because someone just asked me this a couple of days ago. Someone was learning Torah Aleph in the Qumran, one of my students from Hasmo, and he reached out to me with this very question, and it's an excellent question. And for this, we need to look at Rabbi Nachman's understanding of the Yetzer Hara in Torah Ayin Beis in the 72nd lesson of the Qumran, where Rabbi Nachman says over there an amazing thing. He says, what does it mean, the Chazal say, Kol HaGadol Michavero, whoever's greater, Yitzro Gadol Mimenu, his Yetzer Hara is just as commensurate? So says Rabbi Nachman, does a person really think that Yaakov Avinu had a bigger Yetzer Hara than me? And come on, he wasn't involved in Chas v'Shalom, the lowly things that so many of us are. He says what it means is, on the contrary, the greater a person becomes, the greater the Yetzer Hara becomes, meaning the realm of struggle also grows. And so not that they have a worse Yetzer Hara or a lowlier Yetzer Hara, no. They have a more refined Yetzer Hara. Their Yetzer Hara becomes a Gadol. Right? Their Yetzer Hara also becomes Gadol, not greater or more difficult, but on the contrary, loftier, more refined, and that becomes the new struggle, the new realm of struggle. Very basic example of fresh Baal Tshuva who's just getting into Shabbos. Let's say it's so incredibly difficult for them, and it's, sometimes they need to be bribed, just make it through a Shabbos. 10 years down the road, hopefully they get to a place where you couldn't pay them all the money in the world to turn off a light. So what happened? Well, they got bigger. Why isn't their Yetzer Hara the same? The Yetzer Hara also evolved along with them. And so both of these things are true. But the point that we're mentioning here is not, I want to make this clear, not that we're identifying with our Yetzer Tov. It's not that. It's that we are Tov. We are fundamentally Tov. And that the Yetzer Hara is a completely foreign element. It's not that I have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. It's a complete restructuring of the way that I look at what I am as a person. I'm a chelek elukamimal. I'm a spark of the divine. Because of the nachash I have inside of my neshama for many, many, many generations and centuries and thousands of years, from the beginning of time, Adam and all descendants of Adam have inside of themselves a capacity to disconnect from Hashem, to build up a sense of ego, a sense of self with my own ambitions, and to fall for the illusion of Olam Hazeh. But that's external stuff. That's not what I am. And so Hisbodedus is an opportunity to remember. I think it's a moment of memory, of reminding ourselves, first of all, what life is really about, as we're going to see, but what we really are, and therefore how Hashem, who sees only the essential, sees us. Nachon. I have a share on that lesson. Actually, it's very, 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 very big hasaga, big idea. With regard to the first part of the question part, I would say, and it's a little bit what I said before. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name. Sure. What I said before to Shira about the aspect of how we know anything about Hashem. Like, where do we get our information about God from? We aren't born just with this clarity into what Hashem is or isn't. The only way that we know anything about Hashem is the Torah. And the only way that we know anything about the Torah is the tzaddikim. We cannot experience the Torah without Torah Sheba'al Peh, and the tradition of Torah Sheba'al Peh unfolds throughout all of history and continues ad hayom hazeh. And so, by connecting to tzaddikim, particularly to those that spoke this language, we can trust them. They weren't like hippies, they were serious tzaddikim, serious Talmidei Chachamim, people who took Yiddishkeit super, super seriously. But they were beginning to reveal a geulah perspective. And so, by learning these teachings deeply and remembering that all the other voices is that's the Satan, mamish the Satan, mamish. It's the worst kind of Yetzer Hara. It's not the one that makes us do Averis. It's the one that makes us feel less than. The worst.
How do you recognize that?
By recognizing it. Reminding ourselves again and again and again and again, learning these teachings as deeply as we can, as often as we can. Today, it's like we're so parched for these kind of lessons because we have a deluge of the opposite coming at us from all directions, and the tzaddikim are just giving us clarity. So it's difficult, it's a challenge, it's a struggle, and it's something that it's very important, to remind ourselves as much as we can. And that's the ikar. We could speak about it more afterwards, though. Okay? Yeah, you wanted to ask something?